Right. Hello and welcome everyone to the Science of Reading webinar. My name is Beth Yates. I'm the children's consultant from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I'll be the host and question moderator today. And our presenters today are Shaiya Badgley and Paulina Jarrett, both of whom are literacy specialists for the Indiana Department of Education's Literacy Center. Couple more announcements for you. To register for other webinars and other trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please see the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which can be found on our website at www.in.gov/library, and then it's under Services for Libraries. This session is 1 hour, so you're eligible to receive 1 LEU for this presentation. If you're watching a recording of this webinar, instructions on how to obtain your LEU are in the video's description on YouTube, or you can find those instructions on the Indiana State Library's continuing education site under LEU policies. But in short, when you watch a recording, someone in administration at your library should create a certificate for you, as they're the ones who can verify that you watched. But again, if you're watching live, I will put a link in the chat where you will go and fill out the form if you need an LEU certificate. Okay, I think we're finally ready to get started. Again, our presenters today are Shaiya Badgley and Paulina Jarrett, both of the Department of Education Literacy Center. We're so thrilled to have them. Please take it away, Shaiya and Paulina.
All right. Thank you, Beth. Hello, everyone, and good morning. Thank you for being here today. So again, as Beth shared, my name is Paulina Jarrett, and I'm a literacy specialist with the IDOE's Literacy Center. I'm joined by Shaiya, who is our senior literacy specialist. And so we're just really excited to get this professional development started today. It's a session on the science of reading entitled Science of Reading Implementation, Indiana's Priorities for Early Literacy. And so we just want to make that connection to you all, the participants, just the importance of the topic. So as librarians, you play such a vital role in fostering a love of reading and supporting that literacy development in your communities. And so we're hoping that this professional development supports your understanding of the science of reading and will empower you to better support readers of all ages in helping guide them on their literacy journeys. Okay, so just an overview of our team, our Literacy Center. Melanie Hazelwood, she is our Literacy Center Director. Whitney Wachowski, she's our assistant director, of course, Shaiya and myself, and then Josiah Colombo Espinoza, he's our senior dyslexia specialist, and Betty Jo Wills, she's all things contracts, our planning coordinator and contract specialist. Our role, and that is the center provides a professional hub to oversee current efforts in alignment with IDOE's early literacy vision, managing research and evaluative efforts in the science of reading, and maintaining quantitative support in the field. Okay, so for today's agenda, we're going to be starting off with current literacy data and priorities. This does, as Beth shared, it's going to be focused on Indiana and our data statewide in general. So just keep that in mind. We're going to go into an overview of the science of reading, Scarborough's reading rope. We'll get into that if you're familiar with that, and if it's something new, you will be learning more about it. And then our connection to library. So how this pertains to yourselves as librarians, as well as patrons or members that go to your libraries. And then additional SOAR or Science of Reading resources and training as it pertains to you and, again, families.
Yes, welcome everyone. We're excited to share. So, as Paulina mentioned, there is a focus that we do have here in the state of Indiana regarding literacy, but this is not just our state. We can actually look at this on a national level regarding reading proficiency across our country. The slide that you see currently is really just the historic data that we have, since in the state of Indiana, there is a reading proficiency test that is given to all third grade students called I Read 3 previously. And if you followed along with legislation, there have been some changes that will go into place this next spring where this test will not just be given to third grade students, but also second grade students to be able to get a measure in second grade to determine students who are already reaching that reading proficiency or on track or even at risk and may need to utilize interventions and resources to prepare them for third grade. But as you can see from the historic data, since this test was done back in 2012, we did see a decline, and that decline was even exacerbated by COVID 19. And we can see that in 2020, we were at our lowest as a state, and we have continuously improved. We are excited to share that this past year was our largest single year increase on iRead with a 0.6 percentage. But it's also important to address that there are about 14,000 students who did not pass iRead. And so we have students who are struggling to reach that proficiency, which will have an effect on their life. We know from research and for iRead is students who do pass it by grade 3 are roughly 33% more likely to graduate high school. And then nationally, we can take a look at our NAEP results. So that national report card, the last one that was given was back in 22, where 1 in 5 third grade students were not proficient. And then even looking at our fourth and eighth graders based on that national assessment, only 1/3 of those students scored at or above proficiency, which has created this urgency for our state because we know for our students most at risk, that achievement gap still persists. And so, as a department, both before the pandemic and post pandemic, utilizing that data, had a strategic response. And that response was prioritizing early literacy. So, back in 2022, a document was released from the department titled Indiana's Priorities for Early Literacy, which is something available on our website if people want to read and kind of review some of that data. It's important to note that even just a couple of years later in 2024, some of it's a little outdated in terms of data, but these priorities for our state still continue. And so the 3 priorities were to offer science of reading implementation in alignment with our schools, to facilitate high quality, ongoing professional development for educators, to ultimately increase the access and the quality of literacy interventions, remediation, and enrichment for all students. Now, with these priorities, if you've paid attention, you've probably also noticed there's been a financial piece here where we've had a historic investment on literacy in our state. This was first announced back in fall of 2022 with the state partnering with the Lilly Endowment to be able to make that investment of $111 million. And then in 2023, with the state budget, an additional amount of money was able to be allocated to support this investment. So right now we have that historic investment of $170 million to help support our students, our Hoosier students in Indiana, learning to read. And the goal is that we achieve a passage rate of 95% on iRead by 2027. And as we mentioned, there have been some legislative updates that have come through. One is having a statewide definition that we're going to go through today to really just have a foundation of what is the science of reading, as well as to offer grant funds for schools and award scores that are improving those foundational reading skills through the early literacy or Early Literacy Achievement Grant, as well as providing support, targeted support to our schools who are struggling the most. We even know that coming into this next year, we'll be offering a state preferred universal screener so that in kindergarten through grade 2, we're able to get a better temperature check of how students are at meeting those foundational early literacy skills. And then, of course, iRead is now administered in grade 2.
Thank you, Shaiya. Great. So now we're going to go just our overview of the science of reading research. And so to start us off, we have a question that we'd like everyone to reflect on. So if you can take a moment to reflect on the question, what defines a skilled reader? So if you can go ahead and respond in the chat, we will be noticing any responses. So again, that question, what defines a skilled reader? Phonics fluency, phonics and fluency proficiency, comprehending text, a lot of comprehension related responses. Oh, I like that. A skilled reader can read with fluency and comprehend what they've read. Yeah. Yeah. Vocabulary. Great. Okay. Yeah. So, as you can see, it seems like we have a really good understanding of the components and, of course, that we read as readers to comprehend and derive meaning from text we read. So skill readers demonstrate a lot of those things. So we'll go on carry back over into that when we get into Scarborough's reading room too as well. Okay, so the science of reading definition, we have Indiana Code, so IC 20-18-2-17.5. We've kind of scaffolded this definition for us. So we have science of reading means a vast interdisciplinary body of scientifically based research that breaking down a vast interdisciplinary body, meaning more than 50 years of research from multiple fields and outside of education as well. So psychology, cognitive psychology, developmental psychology, school psychology, implementation science, neuroscience, linguistics. And then scientifically based research means experimental or quasi-experimental design, detailed description of study methods, and published in a peer-reviewed journal. Okay. All right, to add to this definition, we see explicit and systematic. Let's see here. Okay. So when we talk about explicit instruction, it's clear and concise. You might have heard of that I do, we do, you do. So in terms of the explicit instruction, and it's involving in a direct explanation of concepts being addressed. Okay. Systematic, think intentionality or intentional in terms of planning and sequenced. It provides the best chance for students to receive the end goal of the lesson, and it really sticks with students. One thing we do want to note here is, although explicit instruction works for all students, it's particularly critical to ensure the success for students who are struggling readers or have been or receive support in special learning needs. Okay. And so here we see the 5 essential components, which we'll get into a little bit further later, but phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension, which is supported by evidence. So when we look at that evidence, we see how proficient reading and writing develop, why some students have difficulty with reading and writing, and how to effectively assess and teach reading and writing to improve outcomes for all students. Okay. Okay, so this component we have is demonstrated a record of success, and when implemented, leads to increased student competencies in the areas of. So I want to just take a minute to go to the 5 components of reading, which are listed in the bulleted areas. But of these 5, I want to highlight, they're identified by the National Reading Panel report. So phonemic awareness is that ability to separate, consider, manipulate individual sounds in spoken language. And then that phonics, which is an understanding of the relationship between letters of written language and the individual sounds of spoken language. Fluency, which is when we think of prosody, automaticity, precision, is the ability to read quickly, accurately, and automatically with proper expression and understanding. Vocabulary, the ability to understand the meaning of words. And then comprehension, which is really our end goal, right? The ability to derive meaning based on the information in a text in combination with the reader's own knowledge.
Yes. And so thank you, Paulina, for going through that definition. And, it's important to take a moment, especially since this has really become a buzz term in education, so much that it is making not only national headlines, but even local headlines about science of reading as our schools are starting to shift practice to research. So it's important to define what it is and what it is not. We know that the science of reading is that it is based on science, it is research, it is not a curriculum. There will be curriculums that are more aligned to that reading research that we have and less aligned. But science of reading is research. We also know that word recognition and language comprehension are both critical and essential to a skilled reader and for science of reading. It's not just phonics. Phonics is essential, especially for our early readers, to have mastery so that they are able to decode words as they learn to read. But language comprehension, like background knowledge and vocabulary and language structures, are just as important for readers. We also know that science of reading is good for all students, and it's not a one size fits all approach. And right here, I just want to focus here about what good for all students means. And that refers to our schools as they are educating and instructing students to learn to read, that they're meeting the needs of the vast majority of students through an effective system of universal core instruction, that they're able to reserve resources and intensify for students who need that extra time versus everyone gets the exact same thing. Now, prior to our definition that we have in legislation from the 2023 legislation session, we actually, back in 2015, had legislation that took place regarding dyslexia. So, as we know, dyslexia is a specific learning disability that's neurological. And as you can see in this definition, there are some common vocabulary terms that are utilized here that we will also see in that science of reading definition as well. All right, so I want to take a moment. I have a sentence we're getting ready to pull up, and I want you to take a moment to read this sentence. Now that you've read it, I want you to pause and think about, what does it mean? I'm sure for many of you, you are thinking, well, Montana, which we know as a state, is expensive. That it means it costs a lot, right? I have another sentence now. Can you read this? What does that mean? Yeah, many of you are probably thinking expansive. Well, we know that expansive means vast, that there's lots of it. And so, looking at these two sentences, if you notice, there is one letter that is different, one letter. And that one letter changes the entire meaning of this sentence. And so for our students who have word reading difficulties and decoding, maybe similar to characteristics of dyslexia, that one letter struggling to decode will change the meaning. But for students who have language comprehension difficulties, maybe they're unsure of what that word expansive is, that it's a lot of land. And they may struggle to comprehend and maybe even confuse it for like the word expensive. And so, as readers, we have background knowledge of Montana. We know that Montana is out west. As readers, we know that Montana has lots of ranches, that it's a lot of space. And so, expansive does make sense based on the background that we have. All right. And so to talk about research, it's important that we have a few anchors within the science of reading. We know that this research has been going on for decades. And so looking at this is called the simple view of reading. This was published back in 1986 by Goff and Tummer. And really what this mathematical model of reading represents is that we know that word recognition times language comprehension equals the product of reading comprehension. Meaning that if you have strong decoding skills and you have strong language skills, your ability to comprehend, to make meaning of the text is going to be stronger. But this is a multiplication problem. So thinking about that, what happens if there's a weakness in one? Let's even say we have someone who is strong in word recognition, but they're not strong. They're weak in language comprehension. Well, we know that something times zero is going to have an effect on that product. It's going to equal zero. And that's why even for our earliest readers, we have to be building both skills of our word recognition and our language comprehension to have reading comprehension. We can also go on to even see how these connect to the essential components. So, as Paulina mentioned, those 5 essential components that the National Reading Panel back in 2000 identified for effective reading instruction. So, within word recognition, that's where we have our phonemic awareness, so breaking things down to the phonemes, the sounds, as well as phonics, so that letter to sound correspondence. And then language comprehension, that's our vocabulary knowledge, as well as even just comprehending and comprehension of our language, our spoken language. And then fluency overlaps because as students become more accurate in reading words and they build to that automaticity, then they're able to focus on that expression, that prosody as they're reading the text. And then our other anchor that we have
All right, so Scarborough's reading rope. We are going to go over this a little bit and more in depth throughout the time, but we just want to expose us to this visual. So this Scarborough's replicates the interconnectedness or interdependence of language comprehension and word recognition that was shown there in the simple view of reading. But proficient reading and reading comprehension is ideal, and that's the outcome product when all the strands are tightly woven together. So from that word recognition and that language comprehension. So together creates and supports a skilled reader. So with any connection that we're thinking of strands, if one of those strands is frayed or not as strong, it's going to lead to challenges in that ability to be a skilled reader. One more note I want to look at is the top 5 strands are becoming increasingly strategic over time, even into adulthood, where if you look at the bottom 3 strands in word recognition, so that phonological awareness, decoding and spelling, and then sight recognition, those become increasingly automatic over time. So typically in elementary school, those early K2 years, it's so important that we're strengthening and providing students or readers with those supports and explicit instruction in those areas. Okay, so on to the reading brain. This is a visual, and as we can see, multiple parts of the brain are being activated during this the time of creating a skilled reader. So it's for us to know that the brain is not wired to read naturally. We need to train and train students to learn to read. So this is by being immersed in learning and activating certain parts of the reading brain. I love the example that if you immerse, let's say you have a child and you're playing classical music, just by having that child listen to classical music doesn't mean that they're going to be able to be like a concert pianist, right? They need to be taught explicitly how to play the piano. So the same thing can be said about a reader. I just want to go over a little bit of the parts of the brain, but not too much because we can see them here. But so when we think of speech and sound, input and output, that's in that frontal lobe. We as humans, because if you think of babies, right, they are naturally able to pick up on language, oral language. And so that's something that supported in that area. And then we have language. Our language is activated, temporal lobe, parietal, we have word analysis, and we see two parts. So it also is activated in the temporal lobe, and then letter word recognition, again, temporal lobe and occipital lobe. So we see that all the components of reading and becoming a skilled reader are activated and supported. Okay. So the reading brain, and we really pulled this quote because we found value in it from DeHaan and reading in the brain. So it is simply not true that there are hundreds of ways to learn to read. When it comes to reading, we all have roughly the same brain that imposes the same constraints in the same learning sequence. So with that said, it's important for us to remember that the reading circuit looks the same in all brains of all readers. But people who are struggling with reading are missing strong connections there. And so what we can do, and yourselves as librarians and supporting literacy in your libraries, is how do we teach and support our students? Because if we're teaching them different ways of creating and reinforcing those brains connections, we're leaving students with those connections and real meaning.
Yes. And so, as we mentioned, we're going to take some time to really kind of break down the skills that we see in Scarborough's reading rope. So, the first focus is going to be towards the bottom of the rope. So, this is known as the word recognition. And as Paulina highlighted, this is where we are becoming more automatic as time goes on for skilled reading. So let's start with phonological awareness. Phonological awareness exists on a continuum of less to more complex. What we do know from research that phonemic awareness, specifically isolating, blending, and segmenting sounds, phoneme, directly supports a reader who is decoding text. So for formal schooling, so when a student enters in kindergarten, that's where the focus of learning phonemic awareness is, those more complex areas. But for our earliest readers, our earliest little ones actually, prior to that formal schooling during that early childhood time, is really learning how to build awareness of our language. So, word awareness, rhyming and alliteration, syllables, and onset and rhymes. And I want to highlight this as an area, especially for all of you librarians who are supporting our earliest Hoosiers here in our state through story time and offering opportunities for families to come to the library. This is a wonderful time to help build that language with rhyming and alliteration, with our syllables and that word awareness, so that when they do get to formal schooling and kindergarten, they have built those skills to be able to really focus on that phonemic awareness. We also know that with word recognition, we have that skill of decoding. So this is really all about applying that alphabetic principle that's taking that spelling and sound correspondence. As you can see, it's visually represented here, such as the phonemes, which is when we're saying it, so that oral production, and matching that to the graphemes. How do you represent? What letters do you utilize to represent that? And then how the letters that we visually see in text. We also know that this goes beyond just decoding, so reading the word, but also encoding, spelling the word. We know that as readers, being able to also write helps demonstrate that mastery of our language. This can go on into even our syllable types. There's this idea, because English is influenced by so many other languages, that it's a very complex and complicated language. But the reality is we know that learning the 6-syllable patterns in our language provides a reliable strategy for decoding approximately 96% of our words. And so for students who are able to master this as a foundation, when they get to unfamiliar words, they can rely on that predictable structure they know of English syllables to read those unknown words. And so as you can see, there are the 6. CLOVER is an acronym that is used often in education just to support. And it's important to note too that in our state, teaching syllables starts even in kindergarten, as you see with those closed syllables like the word cat. That is a closed syllable. And then even the open syllables like go and hi and she. So even in as early as kindergarten, we can start teaching students to rely on these syllables to decode words. This goes on to even include morphology, so reading, not making meaning at this time, because that would be under vocabulary, but rather being able to decode and read those words that have the different affixes or prefixes, or even those inflectual endings, which happen as early as first grade. And then finally, in word recognition, we have a skill known as sight recognition. Sight recognition, which sometimes can be confused for like sight words, that there's these 100 words we need to memorize because they're so frequent in our language. And sight words versus high frequency words are different, because the reality is sight recognition varies from each person. Our sight word memory, which is our orthographic lexicon, is all the words that we, even as adults, can read accurately and effortlessly. As literate adults, we have a sight word memory of like 30,000 to 70,000 words. So for our earliest readers, as they're having to learn these words, as they're orthographically mapping them in their brain to connect the different parts, they can anchor about 10 to 15 new words each day starting in kindergarten. And then in the state, we also, with legislation, specifically had some legislation that named a model that previously has been utilized. And this model was known as the 3-cueing model. Based on research, based on evidence, we know that this is not the model that students need as they are learning to read, and additionally being able to get to unknown words. But as legislation defines it, 3-cueing model refers to reading that uses meaning drawn from the context, pictures, or syntax as a primary basis for teaching word recognition. So there's an example of a book here that maybe an early beginning reader may have, and it's asking those questions of, does it look right? Does it sound right? Does it make sense? But we know based on research that students need to decode the print. They need to apply the sound knowledge, the sound and letter knowledge that they have to decode and read to reach that mastery.
Great. Thank you, Shaiya. So now we're going to get into the language comprehension components. So we have background knowledge, which are facts and concepts. Think of schema, right? What a student has been through experiences, but what they bring, or us as readers, what we bring to our schema is vocabulary knowledge, which is the breadth. So that's defined as a broad knowledge base. Precision, so vocabulary knowledge. We see language structures, referring to syntax and semantics. Verbal reasoning, which is inference, the ability to infer, use metaphors. And then literacy knowledge, which are print concepts and genres. Okay, so we're going to do an exercise. This is actually an experiment from Bransford and Johnson from 1972. But what we want you to do is take a minute and go ahead and read this passage and notice that there is not a title showing on the page. So if you can go ahead and start reading, and then we will have time to kind of take notes what you're finding. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. Now we want to take a minute and write down the essential ideas from the passage. Try to recall as accurately as possible. Try to be as accurate with the details. Okay. And for time's sake, we'll go ahead and move on and share the purpose of this and what we're finding. Great. Okay, so now that we are finding front load knowledge on the next slide, we can see that title now, washing clothes. So hopefully just by seeing that we added a title, we're able to gather more context. It's making more sense. The passage we read, we're connecting to our knowledge base and able to gain meaning from the text. So in this experiment, as in that first study, they found that subjects that were told about laundry before reading it comprehended and recalled significantly more than those who were told the topic after reading. So like in our case, it may go without saying, although those who were never told the topic did worse in their comprehension. So the point of this exercise is just how a small piece of contextual information can give meaning to an entire paragraph. All right, so to go into background knowledge, we have considerations. Key considerations is that readers rely on background knowledge to attend to and make sense of what they're reading. Comprehension also relies on that background, that schema, again, that background knowledge and vocabulary in addition to that. And background knowledge is an essential component in learning because it helps us make sense of new ideas and experiences. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, vocabulary knowledge. When we look at our vocabulary, we see that there's a wide and varied vocabulary based on what students or children are exposed to prior to those elementary years. So we are seeing that their lexicon, so lexicon or the vocabulary of a person as language or branch of knowledge is applied here. So, for example, a child with a word meaning network for dog may consist of related semantics, syntax, and linguistical information. So this would better support that child to know how that word, so like a dog, for example, like the noun is a furry creature, right? And also like literal or figurative meaning, dog days of summer. All right, so now we're going to get into a vocabulary knowledge simple routine. And this was supported by Timothy Shanahan. And he's one of our leader in the reading world. But he recommends following a quick vocabulary routine when reading. And the first step here when looking at this book is an example, a pocket for corduroy. So you want to go ahead and read a book to students and stop to explain the word as needed. So in this case, our word is going to be reluctant. Okay, so step 2 is contextualize the word. So the example in the story, Lisa was reluctant to leave the laundromat without corduroy. Okay, step 3, have the students repeat the word to create the phonological representation. So say the word with me, reluctant. The next step would be explaining the meaning of the word using student-friendly definitions. And that's really key there, those student-friendly definitions. So our example is reluctant means you are not sure you want to do something. Step 5 is providing examples or other contexts. So an example here is someone might be reluctant to eat food that they have never tried before, or someone might be reluctant to ride a roller coaster because it looks scary. Okay, step 6, students, now this is the part that I always like to highlight, is because we as adults want to guide children and give them examples, but it's really important for them to also have time to give examples themselves. So in this example, we have, tell me something about something you would do reluctantly or be reluctant about. So try to use reluctant when you tell it. You could start by saying something like, I would be reluctant to, so providing that sentence stem. And then our next step is students repeat the word again to reinforce its phonological representation. So what's the word we have been talking about? Reluctant. Okay. For our language comprehension, so connecting those syntax and semantics, written syntax or sentence structure and text structure. So again, reinforcing that language comprehension. Semantics is the meaning of words, whereas syntax is referring to, they're able to gain that awareness of the meaning of words with semantics, but then syntax, they can begin to study the meaning of words in addition in order. Okay, so syntax and sentence structure help students clarify meaning within and between sentences. And then one other thing is how we identify a close relationship between the two and how they're interconnected in supporting that language comprehension. Right. So here we have verbal reasoning, how it goes from simple to more complex. Simple, we think of, simply put, explicit. The who, the what, the where, right? We're recalling information and focusing on information within the text. And we can provide opportunities to rephrase or recast what has just been read. Okay, complex means more implicit. You're having to retrieve more information and understanding of the text. So responses in this case, when we're prompting, thinking of like DOK, depth of knowledge questioning, we're moving away from what can be on the page and more like those inference skills, that metacognitive process, that thinking about thinking. Okay, and that connection to literacy knowledge. So we're looking at print concepts, which relate, and I'm thinking of read alouds, right? And genres within books. So knowledge that print conveys meaning in a specific way to support reading and writing. Knowing the organization of different types of text gives students an established understanding of a topic and can anticipate the information that will be presented in the text. So going back to the exercise we did with the passage. So helping students understand that, and then recognizing that genres have different purposes and structures. Typically, I'm thinking of like nonfiction texts. When we read, things are written in a different way than we would speak, right? So helping students understand that language that's represented in the text and gaining meaning from that.
Yes, thank you. So that was breaking down all of those skills. It was a quick overview of the skills that readers have from Scarborough's, as represented on Scarborough's Reading Row. But there are opportunities for you to learn more. And so we want to take some time and just share some additional reading, science of reading resources, as well as training that is available to you. So the first thing I want to share is I'm sure as librarians, so often you have had families come in and ask for support for selecting books for their child to read. We know that for some of our earliest readers, finding those books that they can read independently even kind of requires a little bit of searching. You may previously had people come and say like the educator, the teacher is saying that my child reads at this level. And it's important that we share that book leveling for independent reading can also kind of turns into this prohibiting access to books. The idea for leveling system was really designed for a teacher's tool, not a child's label. We know that based on research, it's really not an effective measure based on evidence for teaching students to read. And so ways that as librarians you can really help is really helping students or children in this case find books that they're interested in, and these can be evaluating books that are too hard or just right. And so for a child and for families as they come in, really looking at the page to say, do I understand what I'm reading? Do I know almost every word? Can I read it aloud and can I read it smoothly? Do I think the topic will interest me? And if the answer is yes, then that book is going to be an easy book for them to read independently. But if there are 5 or more words on a page that they don't know, if the book seems confusing or hard to understand by themselves, and if they read it aloud and it's very choppy and slow, well, then that book is going to be a great book for an adult to read to the child, because students need not only access, especially our beginning readers, access to books that they can read as decoders, but they also need access to books that are authentic with complex language and text as they learn about the world. And libraries are a great resource, as you have many collections filled with wonderful text and illustrations and genres for students. And then additionally, just thinking about a collection. Now, it's important to note that we are not librarians. Our background is as educators. But as educators, these are just some collections that we do recommend to be able to provide more access to books and literature in the library for even our struggling adolescent or even our struggling adult readers as well as our beginning readers. So like audiobooks are a wonderful way for students to access text and language as well as ebooks to provide that accessibility. Decodable books are a great resource for our beginning readers to have access to a collection of books that is very much based on a phonics, scope, and sequence, and being able to decode words. These are just a couple of publishers listed, as well as graphic novels. And then the high-low books. So these are books that would be considered high interest but low readability. So finding books that are there for especially like our adolescent readers, so our middle school, secondary students, as well as, like I said, adult readers as well.
Shaiya, the publisher on the very bottom right underneath Orca is kind of doubt. Could you tell us what that one says?
Saddleback Educational Publishing. And then High Noon Books was the alternative. And we will make sure to give a copy of the slide deck for sharing purposes as well, so that you guys will have a PDF version.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Shaiya. Yeah, and just to let everyone know, I saw that in the chat, so we will definitely be passing that along. All right, so to kind of address some questions, we want you to go ahead and take a moment to reflect, and if you're with colleagues, and you can share with them now or plan to share in the future. But how can you're asking yourself this question: how can I apply this information to best support families who come into the library for support or resources? Okay. So this could be something you're writing down, to yourself, or if you want to share in the chat, that'd be great. We'd love to see. And then the second question is, what is one thing that you can commit to implementing in your own practice? So 2 reflective questions. All right.
All right. So we just want to briefly share a couple of other additional resources from the department. One is Indiana's Literacy Dashboard. This is available on our website that you're able to actually kind of take a look at your own community and the schools, corporations, and areas that you serve to see how they are performing for that foundational reading through iRead. And then just to note that the new data information from spring of 2024 will be coming very soon, given that that was finally ended in July after the summer retest to be able to get added. Also want to make you aware that on Indiana Learning Lab, which is a free digital platform we have available in our state for not only educators, community members, and even families, there is a more comprehensive self-paced course available known as the Indiana Science of Reading modules. It does take about 20 to 25 hours to complete, but through this, it's broken into different modules to go more in depth regarding word recognition and language comprehension and the research that is used as the foundation for science of reading. It was created for educators, but there's definitely a lot of information that as librarians, if you're curious to know more, could be applicable as well. And then additionally,
yes. So this next resource is a favorite. It's the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, which does have a collaboration with the Indiana State Library. But for anyone who might want to know, the $6 million investment with you all, that's amazing, provides each participating child birth to age 5 with access to 1 free book per month. So if you're not familiar yet with Dolly Parton's Imagination Library, that's a really great resource that we wanted to share. Also, we have the Learning Lab. So the Indiana Learning Lab, you can go ahead and even use this QR code to access. It'll take you directly to the site. We have the Parent and Family Support Hub, which again has, you can see the different areas of birth to grade 2, the different grades all the way to grade 12, so high school, end of high school. So on the Learning Lab, you will see a curated collection of trainings related to the science of reading research, expert speaking. So we have authors, university professors focused in the science of reading. And then it's a lot of vetted content related to parental involvement or ways to support patrons and members of the library. This is one of my favorites, just because it does have a search, going back to the Learning Lab, it does have where you can search and pretty much anything that you could possibly want to know in relation to science of reading, you can find there. So go ahead and check it out if you can. Thank you. All right. And then Indiana Learns, which is a tutoring grant for Indiana families. And this provides funding for families in the areas of math and reading tutoring, which occurs outside of the normal school day. And so some cool facts are it provides qualifying families $1,000 per child for that tutoring investment. Over 20,000 students are enrolled currently, and then over 180,000 hours of tutoring have been provided through Indiana Learns.
Yes. All right. So just want to take them out. I know we have only like a couple of minutes to ask if there's any quick questions. And as you are adding those questions, please know that we are always available via email. So our email is up here on the screen at inlitcenter at doe.in.gov.
And we do have 2 questions that folks asked earlier that I can let you know now.
Perfect.
And just real quick, also for everyone who's in attendance, if you need an LEU certificate, I am putting the link to the form in the chat. So be sure to click on that link, go fill out the form if you need an LEU certificate, and please do that, soon after the webinar ends. Okay, our first question is, someone asked, if this research has been going on for 50 years, why has an alternative reading instruction been used?
Yeah. So, that is a great question. There is 2 terminologies that are utilized, known as evidence-based and research versus research-based. And so really just thinking of the idea of when we talk about science of reading research, it is based on research that has been proven. There is evidence that it works. Sometimes research based is sometimes more of that philosophy or an idea to try. And that's kind of where we saw, especially regarding like the 3 queuing model, which was a primary instruction model used for teaching reading. We know based on research that is not effective, that students need explicit instruction in our language to have mastery to be able to be proficient readers.
Great. And I'm sure also not all of that research is 50 years old. Some of it has been like the neurological studies and things like that,
Yeah.
right? For sure.
Yes.
So yeah, it's all coming together. So we did have another question. It's kind of a long one that they wanted to know. Has the state considered dual diagnostics for students to have quantitative measurement at the beginning and end of the year for reading specifically? It seems the COVID slide is also combating the summer slide. So dual assessments, fall and spring, could benefit data measurables for the 5-year goal of IDOE. This could provide educators with the data needed for a successful school year. I guess it's less of a question, more of a have you considered it?
Yeah. So great question and great wondering. So I think there's a couple things I would point out, given this question is, one, iRead is actually given in spring, followed by a retesting window in the summer. So it's actually more towards the end of a year after students have had that formal 2nd grade or 3rd grade. But even in addition to iRead as that reading proficiency test, we have universal screening that does happen kindergarten through grade 2. That is given, that's mandated to be given at the beginning, the first 90 calendar days of a school year, so that educators and schools have, sorry, I think you might have heard something there. Educators are getting like a temperature check of how it's. But then additionally, some schools will go on to do that in middle of the year and even end of the year. So we know based on best practice, up to 3 times a year to really be doing checks before students get to grade 3, or in this case, grade 2, for that reading assessment. But great idea, definitely, and something to consider.
Thank you. We do have a question that a few people have echoed that they are also curious about. They want to know how they can deepen their collection to reflect these strategies, looking for children's book recommendations for emerging readers. And can I just ask Shaiya on my own part, my understanding is that outside of specific decodable book series, that really kids can be reading any of our, like anything we already have, like reading widely. Sorry, go ahead.
Absolutely, definitely. So, a resource that I'm going to give is by the Reading League. So, which is a national nonprofit organization. They actually have an entire website that is dedicated to decodable text resources. I'm going to pop it in chat. And through that, you can look for books that you could add to your collection to have more of a high decodable for our beginning readers. But yes, Beth, it is true. We want children to have access to all of the books that are available there that are age appropriate. This may mean, though, that adults are reading. So that is an opportunity, or even, in my case, I had a little bit, I had a younger sibling, so I would read with her when I was in my adolescent years. And so having opportunities for people at home who can have that shared book reading experience so that students are able to have access to books based on what they're interested in. But then also having access to books that allow them to apply those decoding practices to become more automatic as readers.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
Let's see. If it's okay, it is 12:03, but if it's all right, just take another minute or two to answer the last couple of questions. And if you need to leave, please do. We'll continue to record the answers. Someone wanted to know, they said that the Indiana Learns site says that the grant has actually closed. That was in April. The message was posted, I guess, and it will return for the 24-25 school year, but they don't see an update on there.
We don't oversee the Indiana Learns. That's something that happens within our department. The website, I think somebody put it in chat. And when that comes available, when that is open for people to be able to apply for, check the website. I know part of it was funded by ESSER funds, which are kind of coming towards an end. And so just different fiscal changes that happen where funding takes place, but just encouraged to keep a lookout there.
Gotcha.
I love the proactiveness. So people are very interested. Thank you for that.
Yeah. We're getting to, let's see, someone answered this. Okay, yeah, someone asked, don't many schools use the NWEA so they have scores at the start and end of the school year? And someone responded, yes, NWEA is done 3 times a year. Does that sound correct?
Yeah, so NWEA is an assessment vendor who has a couple of different assessments. They do more of a growth assessment that is typically done 3 times a year, but as well as they do provide they have a MAP reading fluency assessment, which is a universal screener that many schools will also do to check that reading fluency and foundational skills.
Great. Any other questions out there? If I missed your question, please forgive me. Feel free to repost it real fast if you want to copy and paste it. But I think that I've gotten all of the major questions. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. I do want to thank you again, Shaiya and Paulina, so much for this webinar. And yeah, thanks to everyone for attending today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.